Lad mig sige et par ord lige om Frosti Sigurd Jonsson, som skal tale nu. Han er medlem af Altinget, altså det islandske parlament, og har været det siden 2013. Hans fortid er som entreprenør og investor, og det virker han stadigvæk som sådan. Han er i parlamentet, han er formand for udvalget for handel og økonomi, og har en MBA fra London Business School. Så altså en praktisk mand, som viser det sig også, når man så læser den her rapport, og hvis jeg lige må indskyde det, er en fremragende tekst, og altså hvis man kun skal læse en rapport om pengeskabelse her i oktober måned, så synes jeg, at man skal vælge denne her, fordi den er pædagogisk, den er hårdslående, altså den er velargumenteret, den er på mange måder en kort, og her siger jeg kort, altså 100 sider, en relativt klar og overskuelig og kort sag, som man med god fornøjelse kan læse, hvis man gerne vil vide lidt om pengeskabelse og reformer og lidt om den særlige islandske historie, så er det her et skønt tekst at sætte tænder i. Og det er den, som altså også giver os et resumé af, han har sagt nu her. Så hvad skal vi prøve at nærmere?
Is it working? Okay, that's very nice. Okay, put it in my pocket here. Okay, that's the point. Okay. Well, good day to all of you, and thank you for inviting me here to give this presentation of this report, which was kindly introduced by Ib. And also thank you for a kind introduction or characterization of me. Obviously, he should have told us that I come from this country where everything is exploding, the banks, the volcanoes, and also the football team, which is now making great success. So we are the most successful nation at exploiting our banks. And I come here to tell you what we learned from it. Because it's very important to learn from other people's mistakes so you can avoid to repeat them. We have been very naive and childish about our banking systems. And I will sort of tell you a little bit about what I've discovered. My mission by writing this report was to see if we could somehow explain the horrible misfortunes of our monetary system, which is not only this crash in the late in 2008, but also there has been inflation and many other problems. So I wanted to see if we had been looking in the right places for these problems, because we've not been successful at solving them, preventing them. Maybe there was another side to it, and maybe the system itself was broken in some way. And in this time, in 2009 and 10 and 11, after the crash, there were voices coming up and new theories about that there were some serious flaws in the world banking system in general, which obviously we have a copy of in Iceland, and making them more unstable than they should be. So this is the mission for my report, to find out whether the facts and the evidence from our crisis and our problems support these theories, or whether they sort of do not. So I'm going to, in the next just a few minutes, just go through the sort of the essence of the findings. Here you see, so the report was commissioned by the Prime Minister of Iceland. He sort of supported the idea that I should make the report. The report is available for free for download as a PDF from this link, which you can see at the bottom of the page. I think this one, very short. And it's in English, so it's very easy to read. It was written in English, not to make it for the world, but to make it possible for me to discuss the contents with experts, which I was consulting with about the materials when I was working on the report, because there are not a lot of experts in this in Iceland, unfortunately. So I had to talk to a lot of monetary experts, and so I wrote it in English. And then when it came out, the Financial Times somehow caught it and reviewed it, And they, as they say, and also the Economic Intelligence Unit, they say, maybe this idea that is being put forth in this report can be something that can be an example for the rest of the world. And that would be really great if somebody could learn something from our misfortunes. So why is there a need for monetary reform in Iceland in particular? Obviously, every country needs a stable monetary system. It's a prerequisite for a stable economy and a thriving economy. But in Iceland, the stability has been the exception rather than the rule. The Icelandic krona has lost, I think, 99.7% of its purchasing power in the last 50 years. So since we founded the Central Bank of Iceland in 1961, we managed to lose 99.7% of the purchasing power of the medium. I think if you would do the number for Denmark, you would see that you lost 90% of your purchasing power, but we did even more, we did even worse than everybody, so we're the world champion of losing the purchasing power of our medium. Strange country. So, there have been numerous devaluations of the currency against other currencies, which is bad for us. There was a total redenomination of the currency. We had to cut 2 zeros off, like some African states have to do. Our inflation reached the top of 83% in 1983. And there has been an uncontrolled expansion in the money supply. 19-fold increase in 14 years. And obviously this could happen nowhere else but in Iceland. I think here in Denmark you only had something like almost 3-fold increase in the same similar period. And obviously we had the bank collapse in 2008, and it was a spectacular collapse. It was it's probably the 10th biggest bank collapse in the history of the planet. And per capita, you cannot even calculate how big an achievement this was. So, and since 2009 we have had to suffer capital controls, which mean that we cannot invest in Apple shares. The people of Iceland, we have just had to be there and not been able to invest outside Iceland, and it's been very, very restricted. So, but we may be solving our problems slowly. The economy is doing great and has been doing great for the last 5 years. There's good economic growth. We have almost no unemployment now, so maybe capital controls are the way forward for the world. I don't know. But we are doing fantastically great. Suspicious. Yeah, well, okay, so I'll go and show you a slide here. This one, you can see it goes from 1962 to the present day. You can see the history of inflation. And it's been remarkable. We thought we were doing great in the last decade there. You can see here it was almost under control, but here totally out of control. So either we were very bad at controlling the system, or the system was just out of control and not controllable. So could the monetary system be the cause? And I think these are sort of what do we mean by the monetary system? Well, it is interesting that if you see at the top there, Lord Mervyn King, who is the governor of the Bank of England for 10 years, from 2003 to 2013, through the crisis, he blames the system. He says there is something dramatically wrong with the system. It is the worst one we have. Today is the worst possible system. And now he should know what he's talking about. And he's talking about the fractional reserve system, a system which was explained here, where commercial banks can create money when they make loans and lend money, and where banks need no money from the depositors to make new loans, and they can even make money to buy assets, to build a new headquarters. They can just print the money. Are we happy with this? Is this the most stable system, the best one we can have? We have to discuss that, and I think it is I think it's going to be a political debate whether that hasn't happened basically in the last 100 years. It has somehow evolved that we have this system, but it's something we have to decide upon now, whether we want to have the same system in the future. It's become a political agenda item in Iceland, and I think it will be in other countries eventually. And all politicians need to make up their mind. They need to understand what is this, how they have to go on a fact-finding mission. They have to understand how is money made, are we happy with it, is it the system we want for the future. what are the alternatives. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this. And as you see, in Iceland, 93% of the money in the economy that is not used in daily, commerce is created this way by commercial banks. And the money that we rely on from day to day are liabilities of banks, of private banks. And if they go bankrupt, our money ceases to work. So they cannot go bankrupt. So the state has to save them. And a lot of problem stem from just this fact. But another interesting question is maybe it's a good thing to privatize processes, because then the market comes to a good conclusion about how much money we need in society, and the price for the money is right price to optimize resources, that sort of thing. Usually we have these arguments about whether it's good for the state to do things, whether private enterprise does a better job. So how good a job did they do? We have a good story in Iceland, because we used to have state-run banks until here. Obviously the state did horribly, as you can see. It was increasing the amount of money, there was horrible inflation, but then we privatized the banks. Surely they couldn't do any worse. But worse they could do. It totally went off the charts. And you can see in this period, this crazy period of a few years, the banks increased the money supply in the country by 19 times. I think that is ludicrous. And that's a very good question of why did the central bank not stop it? Obviously the central bank did not want this to happen. The duty of the Icelandic central bank is to ensure price stability of the financial markets, just the same as every other bank, and it has a lot of tools to do so. And I will later on show you how that worked. But now, surely this would not happen in your country. So I took a look at the numbers. The yellow line is Denmark. The money supply has been growing, well, I would say much faster than the economy, about three times faster than your economy in general. So your real economy has been growing, and your money supply has been consistently growing 3 times faster. Something is going to happen in the end. It might not be a world record bank crash, but will be some bubble will be burst one day. And maybe I'm being too dark about this, but we should. And there has been an interesting, quick increase here in the last year. See this one? And maybe you have a bubble in the asset markets, I don't know. I'm not an expert on your economy, but I would be worried about this. But back to the question. If we have the central bank, it's full of experts, and they have this toolbox to manage the money supply and the price levels, and avoid all these things from happening, and avoid the money supply from spiraling out of control. Why didn't it do anything? Okay, and it turns out, my finding from the report, they were trying to do stuff. I mean, they were trying to raise the policy rate, and I'll show you in the next slide how that worked. So they tried to do a lot of things. Here you can see how they raised the policy rate. Here it starts really for serious. Do you see these numbers? The policy rate went to 18% to try to discourage the banks from making more loans and discourage people from borrowing. And at this time, the borrowers are now not the real economy, but speculators who are trying to borrow money to save their investments and to save their situation. They will pay any interest at this point, to kick the can down the road. They will borrow money at any cost. And the banks actually were in the game. They didn't want anybody to go bankrupt, because that would mean they would need to mark down their assets. So everybody tries to sort of, push it along. And the speed increases exactly when you want it to sort of slow down a little bit. So it's the system out of control. The central bank was not able to stop it using its conventional tools. And just out of curiosity, because you can see the Icelandic 3 big banks, they were growing in tandem more or less. They were growing at the same speed, which means that they don't need a lot of reserves from the central bank. Even if the central bank would not have increased the reserves, they were able to grow anyway, because they were growing at the same speed, all of them, or very similar speeds. And also, they were very profitable in this period because they were investing in assets. The assets were going up in price because there was so much new money being created by the banks, lent to all kinds of investors who then bid up the price of the investments. The banks were marketing these assets to market. So their profit was also spiraling upwards. Everything was looking fancy. And their equity was growing really, really super fast. So also made it possible for them to print even more money. So, but maybe all this money creation was for the best. Maybe it created a lot of good companies that created jobs, and without this expansion, they would not have been created. Well, half of this money that was created didn't go to the real economy, but went to speculators. I'm not saying that speculation is bad or unnecessary. It is there for a reason, but in this case, it had gone off the charts. Too much of it, too much of a good thing. And most of this money, this extra money, was actually used for this speculation or gambling. And not for the real economy, creating real value and sustainable businesses. So I can show you how that, these are the numbers showing, the uses of money by sector. And you can analyze this in Iceland, maybe you can also do it here in Denmark. You can see firms and households, they're the lower ones here. And obviously there was some growth in household use of capital and use of money, and also the real economy. But look the expansion in the investment sector. It's just, it goes really, really fast. This is trouble in the making. And you can see how the increased money doesn't go all into the real economy, it goes into the financial sector, which is where you have to make a distinction, I think, between the real economy and the financial economy. Both of them are important, but this is unsustainable growth in there. So also you can look at from the other side, the borrowers of money. Who is borrowing the money? What sector is borrowing? And you can see households, they were borrowing quite a lot. Firms, they were not increasing their borrowing. These are the real economy firms. Just regular businesses. And there's a theory that says that regular businesses, they don't want to borrow forever. They just want to borrow enough to grow, to meet the market demand, because they're also constrained by other things. They cannot hire enough people, they cannot find the resources so they don't borrow forever. They just borrow what they need to grow sustainably. Whereas the financial sector has a totally different agenda. It actually borrows forever. It is insatiable. There is always an opportunity to borrow money to buy an instrument that will then go up. And so this game can continue for a long time. It's not restricted by actual resources. It is a gamble. And it feeds on itself in a way. Well, just a little bit about the real economy and the financial sector, and monetarists, because if there are economists in here, they will be interested in why the monetarists went out of fashion, I think in 1970s or 80s, because their worries about the growing money supply turned to be not, increasing money supply didn't translate to more inflation. Or somehow after the 70s, this relationship between money supply and the inflation in the real economy somehow vanished. So people said that we don't need to worry about the money supply anymore. Somehow it doesn't matter. Only thing we're interested in is the price level. If the inflation is low, then we're happy. The banks can do what they want, the financial markets can do what they want. It's not a worry. But there's this guy who's, and it was not well understood what happened, why this correlation was lost. But there's a guy, Dr. Werner, who has shown that maybe we should be looking what happened to the money. And his theory, and it works out quite well in Iceland, is that when you have a liberalization of the financial markets, which happens here in Iceland, it happened maybe sooner in other countries in the 70s in some countries, then the financial sector starts to grow and mop up every extra money that is created that the real economy doesn't want or doesn't need for its growth. It's an interesting theory. You can see in Iceland, here is the chart showing from 1961 to 2011. It shows the change in money supply. So the increase in money supply and the inflation in that year. And there's a hugely strong link here. See the link? It's totally one-to-one correlation. It is lost here. The money supply is growing, the inflation is now tame. So why is it tame? It is tame because the financial sector has been liberated and it is mopping up all the extra capital and using it. So it doesn't go into consumption of real goods, it goes into consumption of financial instruments, which are not measured by the capital, by the consumer price index. So we need to measure these things as well. And now when you have these, they start to make sense. At least for Iceland it does. And maybe it does in other countries. And Richard Werner, who has done this report, he has done a study for many, many economies, and he finds a very good correlation. So money, the amount of money matters. You have to follow it, and it should be the role of the central bank to keep a close eye on it, but it doesn't. And I think I was reading what is the purpose of it. What is the main focus of the Central Bank of Denmark, the National Bank? They don't care about the money supply. So that's dangerous. So what are the problems with this fractional reserve system? If just to summarize, the central bank is just not in control of money creation, and money creation matters. And commercial banks, left to their own devices, they have an incentive to create too much money. And too much money causes either inflation, asset bubbles, or a bank crisis, or all three. And when crisis happens, the state is forced to guarantee the banks because the deposits, they are totally necessary for the economy to be able to operate. So it's not like a normal company. When a normal company goes bankrupt, it can go bankrupt, it's the trouble of the shareholders. When a bank goes bankrupt, it's a problem of everybody. So the state will move in to reduce the loss, but not the loss to the taxpayer. So in Iceland also, because there is a revenue from creating money, if the state would have created all the money that the economy wants to have to run, instead of allowing the banks to do it privately, then the state would be earning 20 billion Icelandic every year in tax revenue, or revenue from creating money. It's like 3% increase in tax revenue for the state. It's not a lot, but it is a lot of money. That would be good to reduce the debt of the state. And also, because we have borrowed our money supply from private entities, the banks, at interest, in fact, though, instead of having the state creating it for free, the state is deeper in debt than is necessary, and I think 20% more debt than it should be if it had created all the money that the economy wanted and needs. And we obviously, so there are a lot of alternatives to fractional reserve system that have been discussed in the literature, and I sort of briefly go through them. The most discussed ones, the 100% reserves. There's narrow banking, limited purpose banking, but for this purpose, I will talk a little bit more about sovereign money, because I think that is the least invasive one. It just nationalizes money creation. It doesn't nationalize banking. It doesn't enforce banks to be split up into different things. So it's very non-invasive operation. And I would say it's a modest change of the system. So it was introduced by Hooper in 2000, and then Dyson in 2012, and they wrote some good books. I'm going to put them up on the slides later. But in this system, the banks just become intermediaries. They don't create money when they lend money. They lend money that was created initially by the central bank. This is what we always thought that banks were doing. But in the system, actually, that would be the case. So the central bank would be creating all the money that is being used in commerce and that can be used to pay taxes. There's notes, coins, and electronic deposits. And also another thing that is carefully managed is the separation of the money powers. The money power is obviously the power to create money and decide how to use it. And today this power is kept with commercial banks. And in this sovereign money, they make a great emphasis on separating this power into its entities to make it more clear, or I would say transparent, and also that there is oversight. So the creation bit, the decision whether to create more money for the economy, will be taken by the central bank, will be independent, or a committee there, that will just of economists are saying now we need more money into the economy, and the economy has been growing, so it needs more money. Otherwise we'll have deflation and other problems. So it will be like that. But the allocation of this new money, which could be a few billion per year, will be taken care of the same way as the tax revenue, just by the government, by parliament. It would be a 3% increase on average. I was doing that, just an estimate. It will not make, I think, politicians crazy about, spending it in the wrong way. It's just spending like the normal tax revenue. It's a 3% increase in the job of spending money per year. So that's a simple one to do. And also in this sovereign money system, the electronic money is not kept on the balance sheet of private banks. It's kept on the balance sheet of the national bank, the central bank. So the central bank cannot go bankrupt. So there's no worry if a private bank goes bust. The money system, the transaction system continues to work. Our economy can work, and we can deal with this bankrupt bank the normal way, almost the normal way we can deal with bankrupt companies. So we'd go through receivations without being backed up by the taxpayer. So that would be good. So there is some discussion about how to spend the new money created. I think it's not very important. It's just like spending any other tax revenue. It's a small sum. It's not a huge issue. How do we transition to sovereign money? I can explain this in detail, but it can be done in theory either overnight or maybe gradually over a few years to give the banks the space they need to modify their business. I think I'm a believer it should be done over like 5 or 7 years, just not to make it too difficult for them to change their business case. It's very important to make clear that we're not nationalizing the lending function of banks. They will continue to decide who is creditworthy, who to lend to. We're just taking away the bit of creating new money. It's just like if anybody would suggest today that we should allow banks to print banknotes, I would say, you're crazy, you don't want banks to print banknotes. We're just taking away, we're just saying, okay, it's crazy to allow them to create electronic banknotes. It's crazy. We should do it ourselves. Now we put people in jail for creating banknotes at home. Don't try it. 12 years. So why do we allow banks, private entities, to create electronic equivalents of banknotes? It's crazy. Because when they create too much money, it has the same effect as if I would go and make 1 billion Icelandic at home on my printer. It would take the purchasing power of all the other money. It would dilute it a little bit. Nobody would notice anything, but I would have a new house, maybe a new factory, making evil stuff. So I don't think it's a healthy situation. So the key benefits of the sovereign money, in part to it being so non-invasive and so small operation. Some people think it's a very, very big operation. If you take just these demand deposits that we use for money every day, it's just like, I think it's less than 20% of the balance sheet of the banks. You take this 15 or 20%, you move it to the balance sheet of the central bank. And you don't leave a hole in the balance sheet, you put another debt in there, because these deposits are the bank's debt. So they have a new debt instead, which is not payable on site, as our demand deposits are. It can be a 10 years debt to the central bank. So they're actually, on the day after, they are better financed than they were before. So there's no shortage of money in the economy on the day after this transition. Actually, there's the same amount of money, and it will then grow when the economy needs more money, but not by banks creating more money, but the central bank creating more money when needed. And obviously, people will say, okay, how can the central bank know how much money to create every year? It will not be a very, very difficult task. So for sure, they will make a mistake. They will make too much money one year and too little money the next year. I'm not too worried about this. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm just looking for a dramatic improvement. Because today we have had banks who are motivated to create the wrong amount of money every year. And they are paid for taking the wrong decision. So they will come to the wrong conclusion every year and create way too much. And that they did in Iceland at least. And I think they've been doing it in more countries. So we could take questions maybe after, but so maybe if we do this modification, we can have fewer inflation bubbles, less inflation, fewer asset bubbles, and maybe fewer bank collapses in the future. If we do nothing and just hope for the best, problems are likely to continue. When we forget about the last crisis and we have a new generation of young and spirited Icelanders, we'll have another crash. But these crashes have been happening in 114 countries. There have been 140 bank crises. Something is wrong. These are the statistics from economists from the International Monetary Fund. They've been doing the counts. Since 1970, there have been 140 bank crises in 100 countries. I think 114 countries. It's quite a lot of failures. So something is wrong maybe with the system, and we should not be shy of looking at the bug and try to fix it. But we need, before we can move on to fix the system, we need to discuss it. We need to understand the problem. We need to agree on what way to solve it, and then we can move forward. And I think we are now in a period of understanding, period of people learning how it really works and what's the wrong, and then we'll have the political debate. People will try to stop it. They will say, we don't want the change, we have vested interest, we think it's, we know our current system better, the devil you know than the devil you don't know, that sort of thing. And there's general fear of change in the world. But if we had never done any improvements, we'll still be using sail ships. Maybe that would be for the best. But we have now even aeroplanes, you know. So I think we are running the system on an archaic form of banking system that is very, very flawed. And coming from the software industry, when we see a bug, we fix it. So let's fix this one. And maybe afterwards I'll talk to you a little bit more about what we're doing in Iceland to move it further. Thank you very much.